directly tied with the hypocephalus, facsimile number 2, in the Book of Abraham, interestingly enough. Egyptian religion has been divided into a whole group of categories: funerary religion, temple religion, magic, and popular piety. Book of the Dead 137b now joins a number of chapters in the Book of the Dead found in contexts which suggests use by the living, including the temples. Now, when we get to the magical texts, the so-called magical texts, and the practices that have been shown to be composed in temporal scriptoria and used by priests, in fact, there's no ancient distinction in the ancient religion between magic and the religion. So our pejorative use of the term magic to describe the ancient religion, that doesn't work for the ancient materials. All funerary equipment, with the exception of coffins and canopic jars, have been found in both temple and magic contexts. So when we take all this consideration into view, it raises the issue of whether our modern distinctions between temple, funeral, and magic, how accurate is that? Does that hold for the ancient religion? And in point of fact, it doesn't hold. That is our way of trying to get a handle on all of this vast corpus of literature. But we now know, without question, that it was, on a more modest scale, the parallels between the daily temple liturgy and Book of the Dead 137 raise the possibility that some of the texts in the Book of the Dead are situating the people in what John Gee says, a Sitz im Leben, rather than just a Sitz im Tod. I love how he puts that. It's a situation of life, not just the situation of death, that these Books of the Dead chapters are being utilized for with the ancient Egyptians. Now, why is that so important? It's important because the Book of Abraham has been criticized for being just a bunch of funerary materials on the papyri that Joseph Smith got the Book of Abraham from. This is no longer the case. There's also an argument that says no true Jew would ever use pagan Egyptian materials. We now know that Jews throughout time periodically did make use of ancient Egyptian materials. We know that clearly based on the evidence that we have. And in fact, Abraham's bosom in Luke chapter 9 in the New Testament, that is borrowing directly from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now, if we understand that the Book of the Dead is not a book about the dead, but about the living, and it's talking about Abraham's bosom with Lazarus in Abraham's bosom alive, this kind of changes the parameters of everything on how we explore the connections between the Egyptians, between Abraham, between the Book of Abraham, between the New Testament, so on and so forth. So, the Book of Abraham may not necessarily be a complete farce whatsoever if it's based on the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is technically the Egyptian book of going forth by day, which also ties in with astronomy and the temple daily liturgy of the priests and the prophets. Then we may have here an initiation temple drama, as Hugh Nibley tried to show in one of his last lectures he ever put together. The Book of Abraham is a temple drama. This could be seriously significant for the interpretation and understanding of the entire Book of Abraham, not just the papyri from which the Book of Abraham came from. This could give us a significant new understanding of all three facsimiles, which I have before interpreted as facsimile number 1 being the sacrifice scene, facsimile number 2 being going into the cosmos, which now has been tied into lamp divination to see the god, and facsimile number 3 being the deification scene. Something significant is going on with our Book of Abraham being tied in with the Hebrew patriarch and the ancient Egyptians. And we have yet to explore all the ramifications of that. But the final nail in the coffin against the Book of Abraham, that's nowhere near the case as our critics would have us pretend it is. Not even in the least. Now with a reassessment of the literature, of all of the literature, the Hebrew, the Jewish, the Greek, the Egyptian, now we can reassess everything all over again, because now our translations are getting us closer to what these ancient Egyptian literatures were really all about. And it was not just funeral literature. It was more like temple literature for the living.